Well, the successful demonstration took place during the Aviation Africa 2025 summit in Kigali, the capital of Rwanda.
The sound that filled the air wasn't the deafening roar of a jet engine, nor the rattling buzz of a helicopter. Instead, it was a quiet electric hum, the kind of sound that doesn't echo an old chapter of aviation, but instead announces a brand new one. Rising from the ground that morning was the Ehang EH-216S, a sleek self-flying passenger drone. No pilot, no cockpit, no traditional controls, just two seats strapped with passengers, while an autonomous brain handled everything that human pilots have controlled for over a century. The drone ascended smoothly, climbing to 100 meters above Kigali's streets. It hovered for a moment, almost pausing as if to say, "Remember this." Because for Africa, this wasn't just a machine lifting into the sky. It was an entire continent rising with it. Officials, journalists, and ordinary citizens watched in awe. They weren't just seeing a test flight, they were witnessing history being carved in real time. Africa's very first public passenger drone flight. And the timing was no coincidence. Rwanda had staged this demonstration to perfection, unveiling it during the Africa Aviation Summit of 2025. Delegates from across the globe expected speeches, handshakes, and predictable discussions. What they got instead was a front-row seat to the future. This was no minor announcement. It was a declaration. Rwanda was making it clear. Africa would no longer play the background music to global aviation. It was stepping forward to conduct the orchestra. For decades, stories about African skies have been dominated by struggle. Airlines collapsing, fleets made of outdated aircraft, and a steady dependence on second-hand planes handed down by the West. That old narrative shattered in an instant the moment the EH-216S rose into the air. Africa was no longer just a buyer of used technology, it had become the stage for aviation's boldest experiment. The symbolism was powerful. For years, skeptics claimed Africa was not ready, too unstable, or too poor for such advanced technology. But on that day in Kigali, all those excuses collapsed. While Western cities remain paralyzed by paperwork, European regulators argue endlessly over what's safe, and American giants hesitate out of fear of disruption, Rwanda acted. Kigali was not only ready, it was ahead. But for ordinary Africans, the deeper meaning wasn't about drones or aviation jargon. It was about pride. For once, Africa wasn't being pitted or lectured, it was being envied. And that envy was burning across the globe. Reactions poured in. Experts admitted they hadn't expected this. Western analysts tried to dismiss it as merely symbolic. But symbols matter, especially in a world where perception shapes investment and confidence. Rwanda didn't just showcase a machine, it showcased a mindset. A mindset that Africa no longer needs permission to innovate. The applause that erupted as the drone landed wasn't only for Rwanda. It was for Africa's arrival on the global stage of high technology. But the question remained, how did a nation smaller in land than many African provinces, with a population of just 13 million, pull off something so seismic? The answer lies in strategy. Rwanda has mastered the art of turning its small size into shockwaves that echo across the world. Historically, power has been measured by vast populations, large territories, and deep treasuries. Rwanda rewrote that formula. What it lacks in scale, it makes up for in precision. Rwanda's tactic is simple: move first. Move faster than others, even when the stage looks too big. Look at this flight through that lens. While larger nations wrestle with bureaucracy, Rwanda acts with surgical speed. It has positioned itself as Africa's laboratory, small enough to test, bold enough to implement, and sharp enough to scale. Innovation here is not an accessory, it is survival. And this is not Rwanda's first bold leap. Years earlier, it stunned the world by rolling out nationwide drone delivery of medical supplies. While Silicon Valley debated ethics and Europe drowned in regulations, Rwanda was flying blood and vaccines across mountains in minutes. That wasn't just about saving lives, it was about sending a message. Africa does not need to wait. This same philosophy now drives its aviation revolution. Rwanda doesn't have Nigeria's financial muscle or South Africa's infrastructure depth, but it has something far more potent: focus. Kigali identifies gaps others overlook and moves first to fill them. Every time it does, it doesn't just rebrand itself but the whole continent. This is Rwanda's genius. It knows perception is half the battle. Consistently delivering first forces global media, investors, and policymakers to take notice. Its medical drone program made it a darling of innovation conferences. Its green policies made it a global model for sustainability. Now, its passenger drone flight has catapulted it into the aviation conversation. Each move is chosen for maximum symbolic impact. And in today's world, symbolism can be as valuable as raw power. But Rwanda doesn't chase vanity projects. It weaves every breakthrough into its national narrative of self-reliance, modernization, and sovereignty. In the 21st century, innovation is political. Being first isn't just bragging rights. It's leverage at negotiating tables with global powers. And that's why Rwanda's smallness isn't a handicap, it's a weapon. It allows Kigali to move with agility, to take risks that larger, slower nations can't afford. With every bold experiment, Rwanda expands its influence far beyond its borders. But vision alone doesn't put a passenger drone into the sky. Partnerships do. Rwanda's success comes from its ability to choose allies with surgical precision. Behind these EH-216S stood two crucial partners, the China Road and Bridge Corporation (CRBC) and Ehang, the global pioneer of autonomous air mobility. Together with Kigali's political will, they formed a triangle of vision, engineering, and technology. CRBC, long known for building Africa's roads and ports, played a different role here. It wasn't about concrete, it was about laying the foundations of an entirely new economy. Landing pads, charging stations, and the infrastructure of tomorrow's aviation. Then came Ehang. Often dismissed in the West as experimental, it was already running trials in China and the Middle East. The EH-216S wasn't a prototype, it was a proven machine. By choosing Rwanda as Africa's launchpad, Ehang didn't just showcase tech, it chose a side. It signaled that Africa, not Europe or America, would be the next frontier of autonomous aviation. This alliance was no charity. Rwanda wasn't a passive recipient of foreign tech. It was an active architect, designing regulations, shaping the legal environment, and deciding how these systems integrate into its cities. That is the real power. Africa as co-owner, not showroom. For Ehang, Rwanda proved its aircraft could thrive outside Asia. For CRBC, it demonstrated that Chinese engineering could extend from roads to the skies. And for Rwanda, both partners became tools of leverage, anchoring it at the center of a new technological axis. Western critics predictably dismissed this as another chapter of Chinese influence. But the real story is different. This was not about China expanding, it was about Africa choosing. Kigali didn't wait for Washington or Brussels to deliver outdated hand-me-downs. It went where ambition matched its own. And this brings us to the battlefield Rwanda just entered, the low-altitude economy. This is the invisible airspace below 1,000 meters where drones, flying taxis, and surveillance craft operate. For decades, aviation focused on high-altitude jets crossing continents. But the future lies closer to the ground, moving people across cities, delivering medicine to remote villages, monitoring crops, and even transforming tourism. The implications for Africa are massive. Imagine Lagos commuters, freed from 4-hour traffic jams. Imagine Nairobi's rural villages receiving medicine in minutes, not days. Imagine African farmers monitoring soil health or preventing locust plagues before they spread. Imagine tourists soaring silently above Rwanda's volcanoes or coastal coral reefs in electric aircraft. This isn't just convenience, it's sovereignty. Whoever controls this space will control logistics, agriculture, healthcare, and even security. If Africa fails to claim it, foreign corporations will dominate, just as they once seized mines, oil, and railroads. That's why Rwanda's move matters. It planted a flag in Africa's skies. It proved that Africa doesn't have to wait. It can write its own rules and own its air. Globally, only a handful of nations are daring enough to experiment with flying taxis. China leads. The UAE is branding itself as a luxury hub. Europe is paralyzed by regulation. The US fears lawsuits. And now Rwanda has entered the race, not as a follower but as a pioneer. This matters because it shatters the old hierarchy. For a century, aviation's story excluded Africa. The Wright brothers, Boeing, Airbus, and China's new aviation giants all shaped history while Africa was sidelined. Kigali just smashed that narrative. The psychological shift is just as important as the technological one. Investors, citizens, and leaders alike now know. First can happen in Africa. That changes where money flows, where partnerships are formed, and how Africa negotiates its future. Of course, challenges remain. The West won't easily give up its dominance. Regulations, trade barriers, and narratives of safety will be used to slow Africa down. But the precedent has been set. Kigali proved that Africa can act independently, aligning not with old colonial overseers but with partners who share its appetite for disruption. As the EH-216S descended back onto Kigali's tarmac, the applause carried more than excitement. It carried defiance. It carried pride. And it carried a message to the rest of the world. Africa will no longer be a passenger in aviation story. It will be a pilot. The question now is no longer whether Africa can keep up. The real question is whether the rest of the world can keep up with Africa.